July 14, 1918. 0447 hours. Villers-Cotterets Sector, Aisne-Marne Offensive Front. Captain Marcus Whitfield of the United States 26th Infantry Division crouched in the pre-dawn mist, watching his men load buckshot shells into pump-action shotguns that the German High Command had officially declared illegal weapons of war. Within 17 minutes, German trench defenders would experience a weapon that violated every assumption they held about modern warfare, transforming close-quarters combat from a battle of bayonets and rifles into systematic room-clearing devastation that rendered traditional defensive tactics obsolete. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The weapon was deceptively simple. A 12-gauge Winchester Model 1897 pump-action shotgun, commercially available in American sporting goods stores for $23. Each shell contained 9 lead pellets, each pellet 0.3 of an inch in diameter, propelled at 1,200 feet per second in a spreading pattern that grew wider with distance. At ranges under 30 yards, the effective killing zone of a single shotgun blast exceeded the accuracy envelope of the standard bolt-action rifle by a factor of 15. No amount of training, no speed of bolt manipulation, no expertise with bayonet technique could overcome the fundamental mathematics of 9 simultaneous projectiles versus 1. German soldiers preparing defensive positions in the trenches ahead had been warned through official channels that American forces were deploying shotguns in violation of the Hague Convention prohibitions against weapons causing unnecessary suffering. The German government had filed formal diplomatic protests claiming that shotgun pellets caused wounds that could not be properly treated under field conditions. They demanded immediate cessation of shotgun use and threatened to execute any American soldier captured while carrying such weapons. The protests revealed something the German High Command would never explicitly acknowledge. They were terrified of a weapon that cost $23 and could be operated effectively by soldiers with minimal training. The psychological impact of facing shotguns in confined spaces had already devastated German morale in preliminary encounters. Soldiers who survived shotgun attacks described wounds unlike anything produced by conventional arms. The spreading pattern of pellets meant that near misses still caused casualties. The pump-action mechanism allowed sustained fire faster than any bolt-action rifle. The devastating close-range effectiveness transformed every corner, every dugout entrance, every communication trench into a potential killing zone where traditional infantry tactics provided no advantage. Captain Whitfield understood what the diplomatic protests actually meant. The Germans were losing the trench warfare battle not to superior strategy or overwhelming numbers, but to a commercial hunting weapon that American doctrine had adapted for combat faster than German leadership could formulate effective countermeasures. The shotgun represented everything the professional German military establishment found conceptually offensive about American military culture. It was unsophisticated, inelegant, commercially derived rather than purpose-designed for military application, and absolutely devastating in the conditions that dominated Western Front combat. The Winchester Model 1897 had never been intended as a military weapon. John Browning designed it in 1897 as a sporting and hunting shotgun for the American civilian market. The pump-action mechanism allowed rapid follow-up shots essential for wing shooting and hunting moving game. The exposed hammer provided positive confirmation of readiness. The tubular magazine held 6 shells, giving a total capacity of 7 rounds when one was chambered. The entire weapon weighed 8 pounds when loaded, lighter than the standard Springfield rifle carried by most American infantry. What made the Model 1897 uniquely suited to military adaptation was a design quirk that Browning had incorporated for competitive shooters. The weapon lacked a trigger disconnector, meaning that if the trigger was held down while operating the pump action, the gun would fire immediately upon the bolt closing. This feature, called slam firing, allowed trained operators to empty the magazine in under 3 seconds, creating a sustained rate of fire that no bolt-action rifle could match. In the confined spaces of trench warfare where targets appeared suddenly at close range, this capability transformed combat dynamics entirely. The United States Army Ordnance Department had initially rejected shotguns for military service, citing concerns about effective range, ammunition logistics, and compatibility with existing doctrine. The standard military mindset emphasized long-range marksmanship and the controlled fire of trained riflemen. Shotguns, with their limited effective range beyond 50 yards, seemed incompatible with modern warfare principles that prioritized engagement at distances exceeding 300 yards. The Ordnance Department assessment concluded that shotguns were hunting weapons with no legitimate military application. General John Pershing had overruled the Ordnance Department assessment based on direct reports from frontline commanders who had observed British and French trench warfare tactics. The realities of Western Front combat bore little resemblance to the open-field maneuver warfare that dominated American military doctrine. Trenches, communication tunnels, dugouts, and fortified positions created combat environments where engagements occurred at ranges measured in feet rather than yards. Visibility was limited by trench walls, smoke, darkness, and the chaotic conditions of close assault. Soldiers needed weapons optimized for close-quarters effectiveness rather than long-range precision. Pershing's decision to authorize shotgun procurement in September 1917 represented a fundamental recognition that American forces would face combat conditions unlike anything in their training or doctrinal preparation. The Western Front had evolved into a form of siege warfare where success depended on the ability to clear fortified positions room by room, trench by trench, in conditions where conventional rifle tactics provided minimal advantage. The shotgun offered a solution specifically optimized for these conditions, even if it violated traditional military aesthetics about proper infantry weapons. The procurement orders specified delivery of 30,000 Winchester Model 1897 trench guns, a militarized version featuring a shortened 20-inch barrel, ventilated barrel shroud, bayonet adapter, and sling swivels. Winchester received the contract in October 1917 with delivery requirements that seemed impossible under normal manufacturing conditions. The company was already operating at capacity producing rifles for British and French contracts. Adding shotgun production would require retooling facilities, training workers, and establishing quality control procedures for weapons that would face conditions far more severe than any hunting application. Winchester's New Haven facility accomplished what the Ordnance Department had declared infeasible. By December 1917, the first batch of military shotguns reached American Expeditionary Forces training camps in France. By March 1918, production had reached capacity with approximately 1,200 shotguns delivered weekly. By June 1918, over 19,000 weapons had been distributed to combat units. The production achievement demonstrated American industrial flexibility and the advantages of adapting existing commercial designs rather than developing purpose-built military systems from scratch. Each shotgun was accompanied by ammunition that transformed the commercial hunting weapon into a devastating combat system. The standard load was military buckshot, designated as 00 buck, containing 9 lead pellets each measuring .33 inches in diameter. The pellets were stacked in a 3-2-2-2 configuration inside a brass shell case measuring 2 3/4 inches in length. When fired, the pellet pattern spread approximately 1 inch per yard of distance, creating a circular impact zone roughly 30 inches in diameter at typical trench combat ranges of 10 to 30 yards. The mathematics of lethality were straightforward and overwhelming. A single pellet carried sufficient energy to incapacitate a human target. 9 pellets spread across a 30-inch circle meant that accurate aim was not required in the traditional marksmanship sense. The shooter needed only to point the weapon in the general direction of the target within a cone of approximately 15 degrees. At ranges under 20 yards, missing was nearly impossible if the weapon was pointed anywhere near the intended target. This forgiveness of aiming error made the shotgun effective even when operated by soldiers under extreme stress, in darkness, or in the chaotic conditions of close assault. Traditional rifle tactics emphasized careful aim, controlled breathing, trigger squeeze, and follow-through. These techniques required training, practice, and composure under fire. A trained rifleman could achieve reliable hits on man-sized targets at 300 yards under ideal conditions. In actual combat, especially in the confined spaces of trenches, achieving accurate rifle fire was extraordinarily difficult. Soldiers fired at moving targets glimpsed briefly through smoke and chaos. The stress of combat degraded fine motor control and visual acuity. Hit rates in actual combat conditions typically ranged between 2 and 5% for rifle fire. Shotgun effectiveness inverted these statistics entirely. At close range, hit rates approached 90% even among minimally trained soldiers. The spreading pattern of pellets compensated for aiming errors, body movement, and target motion. The psychological effect of seeing 9 simultaneous projectiles was devastating to enemy morale. Soldiers who survived rifle wounds often continued fighting. Soldiers who survived shotgun wounds typically did not, even when the physical injuries were comparable, because the psychological impact of multiple simultaneous impacts was profoundly disorienting. The German military establishment's formal protest against American shotgun use revealed their recognition of these tactical implications. The diplomatic note filed through the Swiss embassy in February 1918 claimed that shotgun pellets violated Hague Convention prohibitions against projectiles designed to expand or flatten in the human body. The German government demanded immediate cessation of shotgun deployment and announced that any American soldier captured while carrying a shotgun would be executed as a war criminal rather than treated as a prisoner of war under Geneva Convention protections. The American response, drafted by Secretary of State Robert Lansing and approved by President Wilson, rejected the German claims entirely. The reply noted that shotgun pellets were solid lead spheres that neither expanded nor fragmented, making them fully compliant with Hague Convention requirements. Furthermore, the note observed that Germany itself employed flamethrowers, poison gas, and serrated bayonets, all of which caused suffering far exceeding any wounds produced by shotgun pellets. The response concluded by stating that any execution of American prisoners for carrying standard-issue weapons would be considered murder and would result in equivalent retaliation against German prisoners. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The diplomatic exchange had no effect on American tactical employment of shotguns, but it revealed the psychological impact these weapons were having on German forces. The formal protests and execution threats were fundamentally defensive reactions from a military establishment confronting a tactical problem they had no effective solution for. Traditional infantry training emphasized marksmanship, fire discipline, and controlled defensive tactics. None of these skills provided any advantage against soldiers armed with weapons that delivered 9 projectiles simultaneously at close range. Captain Whitfield's unit, the 26th Infantry Division's 104th Infantry Regiment, had received their allotment of shotguns in April 1918. The weapons were distributed on the basis of 2 shotguns per rifle squad, typically assigned to the squad leader and 1 designated trench clearer. The initial reception among the troops was mixed. Many soldiers viewed shotguns as hunting weapons incompatible with the dignity of military service. Others questioned whether a weapon with limited range could be effective against enemies armed with rifles capable of accurate fire at 10 times the distance. The first combat employment resolved all skepticism immediately. During a trench raid on May 3, 1918, Corporal James Mitchell led his squad into a German communication trench defended by approximately 20 soldiers. Mitchell carried a Winchester Model 1897 loaded with buckshot. The German defenders, positioned in a narrow trench approximately 4 feet wide, opened fire with their Mauser rifles as the Americans approached. Mitchell's first shotgun blast, fired from 15 feet distance, struck 3 German soldiers simultaneously. His second shot, delivered less than 2 seconds later while advancing, hit 2 more. The third shot cleared the remaining defenders from that section of trench. The engagement lasted under 30 seconds. Mitchell's squad suffered no casualties. The German defensive position, which would have required sustained rifle fire and grenades to clear under conventional tactics, was neutralized by 1 man with a shotgun firing 3 times. The after-action report noted that the psychological effect on the surviving German soldiers was profound. Several surrendered immediately rather than face additional shotgun fire. Those who attempted to flee were caught in narrow trench confines where their bolt-action rifles were useless against sustained pump-action fire. Word of the engagement spread rapidly through both American and German forces. American soldiers began requesting shotgun assignments, recognizing the tactical advantage in close-quarters fighting. German soldiers began developing new defensive tactics specifically designed to avoid situations where shotguns could be employed effectively. Trenches were modified to include sharper angles and more compartmentalization, forcing attackers to expose themselves before they could bring shotguns to bear. Defensive positions were pushed farther back from trench walls, increasing engagement distances beyond effective shotgun range. These modifications revealed the strategic impact of a weapon that cost $23 in commercial form and required minimal training to employ effectively. The German military, with its emphasis on professional training and sophisticated tactics, was being forced to redesign defensive infrastructure to counter a weapon that violated every assumption about proper military armament. The shotgun's effectiveness derived not from technological sophistication but from perfect optimization for the specific conditions of trench warfare, conditions that the professional military establishments of Europe had failed to adequately address in their weapons development. The ammunition logistics of shotgun employment presented challenges that American supply officers had to solve through improvisation and adaptation. Standard rifle ammunition was manufactured in enormous quantities at government arsenals using established production processes. Shotgun shells, by contrast, were commercial products manufactured by civilian companies to sporting specifications. The transition from commercial to military production required establishing new supply chains, quality control procedures, and distribution systems that did not exist in military logistics doctrine. Winchester, Remington, and Peters Cartridge Company received contracts to manufacture military buckshot ammunition to specifications that differed significantly from commercial hunting loads. Military shells required heavier brass cases to withstand rough handling in combat conditions. The powder charges needed to function reliably in extreme temperature ranges from -20 to +120 degrees Fahrenheit. The pellets required harder lead alloys to maintain spherical shape when fired, ensuring consistent pattern performance. The primers needed to be insensitive to shock yet reliable under conditions of moisture, mud, and extended storage. Production reached approximately 1 million rounds monthly by May 1918, with total wartime production exceeding 8 million rounds by the November armistice. Each combat shotgun was typically allocated 300 rounds, far fewer than the 1,000 rounds standard for rifles, reflecting both the limited supply and the recognition that shotgun employment was specialized rather than general purpose. Soldiers carried 20 rounds in canvas bandoliers during combat operations, a load that weighed approximately 4 pounds and provided sufficient ammunition for typical close assault missions. The training doctrine for shotgun employment evolved through practical experience rather than formal development. No military training manuals addressed shotgun tactics because no military establishment had previously considered shotguns legitimate combat weapons. American instructors developed training programs based on observed combat effectiveness, emphasizing speed of target acquisition, aggressive forward movement, and sustained fire rather than precision marksmanship. The goal was to train soldiers to recognize shotgun-appropriate situations and transition smoothly between rifles for long-range engagement and shotguns for close assault. The typical training progression began with familiarization firing at stationary targets at ranges from 5 to 30 yards. Soldiers learned that shotgun patterns spread wider than most anticipated, requiring less precise aim than rifle shooting. They practiced rapid magazine loading, learning to feed shells into the tubular magazine while maintaining visual contact with potential targets. They drilled on the pump action mechanism until the motion became automatic, developing muscle memory that would function under combat stress. Advanced training emphasized movement and target transitions. Soldiers practiced advancing through mock-up trenches, engaging multiple targets in rapid succession. They learned to use the slam-fire technique, holding the trigger down while pumping the action to achieve maximum rate of fire when facing multiple threats. They practiced immediate action drills for malfunctions, learning to clear stuck shells or feeding problems without losing focus on the tactical situation. The most critical training element was developing judgment about when shotguns were appropriate versus when rifles remained superior. Shotguns dominated in confined spaces, during night operations, in situations requiring immediate overwhelming firepower, and when facing multiple targets at close range. Rifles remained essential for long-range engagement, for suppressive fire, for situations requiring precision shooting, and in open terrain where shotgun range limitations became prohibitive. Effective soldiers learned to transition between weapons based on tactical circumstances, using each weapon system where it provided maximum advantage. By July 1918, American forces had incorporated shotguns into standard assault tactics for trench-clearing operations. The typical assault squad formation placed shotgun-armed soldiers at the front during entry into German trenches, with riflemen following to provide cover and engage targets beyond shotgun range. This formation maximized the psychological and tactical impact of the shotguns while maintaining the flexibility to respond to varied combat conditions. Captain Whitfield understood that the upcoming assault would test these tactics under conditions more challenging than any previous engagement. The German defensive positions in the Villers-Cotterêts sector represented some of the most sophisticated fortifications on the Western Front, constructed over months of preparation with multiple defensive layers, interlocking fields of fire, and prepared fallback positions. The Germans knew American forces were coming and had concentrated experienced troops in positions optimized for defensive warfare. The American battle plan called for a pre-dawn assault following a brief but intense artillery barrage designed to suppress German defenders without destroying the trench systems that American forces would need to occupy. The assault troops would advance under cover of darkness and morning fog, reaching German trenches before defenders could fully recover from the artillery bombardment. Speed and overwhelming close-range firepower would be essential to success. Whitfield's company had been assigned the task of clearing 300 yards of German front-line trench and 2 communication trenches leading to secondary defensive positions. Intelligence estimates suggested defending forces of approximately 150 German soldiers, primarily from veteran regiments with extensive combat experience. The German forces knew they faced American troops armed with shotguns and had modified their defensive tactics accordingly, but doctrine and training could not eliminate the fundamental tactical advantage that shotguns provided in close-quarters combat. The men of Whitfield's company prepared their equipment in the pre-dawn darkness with the methodical efficiency of experienced soldiers. Shotgun-armed troops checked their weapons, ensuring smooth action operation and fully loaded magazines. They filled their canvas bandoliers with buckshot shells, each soldier carrying 20 rounds in addition to the 7 in their weapon. Riflemen carried standard loads of rifle ammunition along with grenades and other assault equipment. Everyone understood their role in the upcoming assault and the tactics that had proven effective in previous operations. The artillery barrage commenced at precisely 0500 hours, transforming the quiet morning into thunder and chaos. American 75mm guns and 155mm howitzers pounded German positions with high explosive and shrapnel rounds designed to suppress defenders and destroy obstacles. The barrage was deliberately brief, lasting only 12 minutes rather than the hours-long bombardments typical of previous Western Front operations. The goal was tactical surprise rather than complete destruction, accepting higher risk in exchange for catching defenders unprepared. At 0512 hours, the barrage lifted and shifted to German secondary positions. Whitfield's company rose from their assault positions and advanced toward the German trenches through morning fog that reduced visibility to less than 50 yards. The distance to the German front line was approximately 200 yards across no man's land, a sprint under combat conditions that would take less than 3 minutes if resistance was minimal, much longer if German machine guns survived the artillery barrage. The advance proceeded with surprising ease through the first 100 yards. The artillery had been devastatingly accurate, destroying many defensive positions and forcing survivors to seek cover rather than maintain observation. The morning fog concealed the American advance until they were within 70 yards of the German trench line. Then the fog thinned momentarily and German defenders opened fire. Machine gun fire from a position that had survived the artillery barrage swept across the advancing Americans, killing 3 soldiers immediately and wounding 5 others. The assault momentum faltered as troops dove for shell holes and any available cover. Traditional tactics would have called for establishing a base of fire to suppress the machine gun while flanking elements maneuvered for position. This approach would take time, cost casualties, and allowed German defenders to fully recover from the artillery barrage. Whitfield made a different decision. He ordered the shotgun-armed soldiers to continue the assault directly toward the German trench while riflemen provided suppressive fire against identified defensive positions. The shotgun troops would rely on speed, fog, and the confusion of combat to reach the German trenches before defenders could concentrate sufficient fire to stop them. It was aggressive to the point of recklessness, but Whitfield understood that hesitation would be more costly than bold action. 6 shotgun-armed soldiers sprinted forward through the thinning fog while rifle fire from their comrades forced German defenders to keep their heads down. The machine gun continued firing but was shooting blind through the fog at suspected positions rather than engaging observed targets. The Americans covered the remaining 70 yards in less than 40 seconds, reaching the German trench parapet before defenders fully realized how close they had come. Corporal David Harrison was the first American soldier into the German trench, dropping the 6 feet from the parapet to the trench floor and immediately firing his Winchester shotgun at a German soldier who was turning to face him. The buckshot pattern at 8 feet distance was less than 10 inches in diameter, delivering all 9 pellets into the center mass of the target. The German soldier collapsed instantly. Harrison pumped the action and fired again at a second soldier emerging from a dugout entrance, then a third time at a group of 3 soldiers attempting to bring their rifles to bear. The close confines of the trench made the shotgun overwhelmingly dominant. German soldiers with their Mauser rifles required space to operate the bolt action and time to aim. Harrison needed only to point his weapon in the general direction of targets and pull the trigger. The pump action allowed him to fire faster than the Germans could work their bolts even if they had successfully engaged targets. The spreading pattern of buckshot meant that near misses still caused casualties while near misses with rifles were simply misses. Within 15 seconds, Harrison had fired all 7 rounds in his shotgun, clearing approximately 20 feet of trench and eliminating 8 German defenders. He dropped behind a traverse wall to reload while 2 more American soldiers dropped into the trench behind him, their shotguns already firing at new targets. The systematic clearing of the German trench had begun, and it proceeded with a speed and efficiency that no amount of German training or defensive preparation could counter. The fundamental tactical reality was brutally simple. In a confined space 4 feet wide where combat occurred at ranges measured in feet, 9 simultaneous projectiles defeated 1 carefully aimed shot every single time. German soldiers were not cowards and they were not poorly trained. They were professional soldiers attempting to defend prepared positions using tactics that had been effective against British and French forces for years. But those tactics were optimized for rifle range combat, not for facing weapons that transformed close-quarters fighting into systematic room clearing where traditional marksmanship provided no advantage whatsoever. The assault continued through the German trench system with relentless momentum that German defenders found impossible to slow. American soldiers with shotguns led the advance, clearing each section of trench before riflemen moved forward to consolidate positions and provide security. The shotgun-armed troops moved with aggressive confidence born from knowing their weapons provided overwhelming advantage at these ranges. They did not hesitate at corners or dugout entrances because hesitation meant allowing defenders time to prepare. Speed and sustained firepower were the tactics, and the shotguns enabled both perfectly. The tactical success of shotgun employment in the Villers-Cotteret's assault reverberated through both American and German command structures with implications that extended far beyond a single engagement. Within 48 hours of Captain Whitfield's successful trench-clearing operation, reports reached General Pershing's headquarters documenting the extraordinary effectiveness of shotgun-armed assault troops. The after-action analysis revealed statistics that challenged fundamental assumptions about infantry combat effectiveness and weapons optimization. Whitfield's company had cleared 300 yards of German front-line trench and 2 communication trenches in 17 minutes with casualties of 3 killed and 8 wounded. German defensive forces numbering approximately 150 soldiers suffered estimated casualties exceeding 90 killed or severely wounded with an additional 37 captured. The casualty ratio of 8-1 in favor of the attacking force represented a complete inversion of typical trench warfare mathematics where defenders holding prepared positions normally inflicted casualties at ratios favoring defense by 3-1 or greater. The operational analysis identified shotgun employment as the decisive tactical factor. Soldiers armed with Winchester Model 1897 shotguns had led every phase of the trench-clearing operation, engaging German defenders at ranges where traditional rifle tactics provided minimal advantage. The pump-action mechanism allowed sustained fire rates exceeding any bolt-action rifle, creating suppressive effects that prevented effective German response. The spreading pattern of buckshot pellets meant that American soldiers achieved hit rates approaching 90% even under the stress and chaos of close combat, compared to typical rifle hit rates of 5% or less in similar conditions. These results validated General Pershing's decision to override Ordnance Department objections and authorize shotgun procurement. The weapon that professional military establishments dismissed as unsuitable for modern warfare had proven devastatingly effective in the actual conditions dominating Western Front combat. The success demonstrated a principle that would influence military procurement decisions for generations afterward. Weapons should be optimized for the conditions where they will actually be employed rather than designed to meet theoretical doctrinal requirements or aesthetic preferences about what constitutes proper military equipment. The German High Command response to increasing American shotgun employment revealed the psychological and tactical crisis these weapons created within their defensive doctrine. The formal diplomatic protests filed through neutral governments represented only the visible portion of a much deeper institutional struggle to develop effective countermeasures against a weapon that violated every assumption German military theory held about infantry combat. The professional German military establishment found itself confronting a fundamental challenge to its conceptual framework for defensive warfare. German tactical doctrine emphasized defensive positions constructed in depth with interlocking fields of fire, prepared fallback positions, and carefully trained infantry capable of delivering accurate rifle fire at ranges exceeding 300 meters. This doctrine had proven extraordinarily effective against British and French forces throughout 4 years of warfare, inflicting casualties at rates that made offensive operations prohibitively expensive in terms of both lives and material resources. The defensive advantage created by this system had stalemated the Western Front despite repeated Allied offensives employing overwhelming superiority in numbers and artillery support. American shotgun tactics undermined this entire defensive framework by optimizing for the close-range phase of combat that German doctrine treated as the final desperate stage after defensive fires had failed. German defensive theory assumed that attackers reaching German trenches would be disorganized, depleted, and vulnerable to counterattack by fresh reserves. This assumption proved catastrophically incorrect when facing soldiers armed with weapons specifically designed for close-quarters dominance. American assault troops reached German trenches in organized formations, immediately established fire superiority through sustained shotgun fire, and cleared defensive positions faster than German reserves could respond. The German army issued multiple tactical directives attempting to develop effective countermeasures against shotgun-armed assault troops. A directive dated July 28, 1918 ordered all defensive positions to incorporate additional compartmentalization, requiring traverse walls every 5 meters to limit shotgun effectiveness by breaking line of sight. Defensive positions were to be pushed back from forward trench walls to increase engagement distances beyond effective shotgun range. Machine gun positions were to be sited to provide enfilade fire down communication trenches where shotgun-armed attackers would be most vulnerable. These modifications represented sound tactical thinking based on careful analysis of shotgun capabilities and limitations. Compartmentalized trenches with frequent traverse walls would force attackers to expose themselves repeatedly when advancing, creating opportunities for defenders to engage at ranges where rifles maintained advantage. Pushing defensive positions back from forward walls would create engagement distances of 40 to 60 yards where rifle accuracy became significant while shotgun patterns spread reduced effectiveness. Enfilade machine gun fire would exploit the narrow confines of trenches where attackers could not disperse to avoid concentrated fire. Implementation of these modifications proved extraordinarily difficult under operational conditions. Reconstructing existing defensive positions required massive labor investment and materials that German logistics could barely provide given competing demands across multiple fronts. Positions modified according to the new directives were more complex to defend, requiring additional personnel to cover compartmentalized sections effectively. The modifications created defensive positions optimized against shotgun assault but potentially more vulnerable to artillery bombardment and conventional rifle assault. More fundamentally, the tactical modifications addressed symptoms rather than the underlying problem. American forces possessed a weapon system optimized for close-quarters combat that German forces had no equivalent for and could not rapidly develop. The German military establishment had to modify defensive doctrine and infrastructure to compensate for a capability gap that reflected deeper differences in industrial capacity, organizational flexibility, and willingness to adapt commercial technologies for military application. The industrial dimension of shotgun employment revealed advantages that extended beyond tactical effectiveness into the realm of strategic logistics and manufacturing capacity. Winchester, Remington, and other American manufacturers produced the Model 1897 shotgun using established commercial manufacturing processes refined over years of civilian market competition. The transition from commercial to military production required minimal retooling because the military trench gun variant differed from commercial models only in barrel length, addition of a barrel shroud, and incorporation of bayonet mounting provisions. These modifications could be implemented without fundamental changes to manufacturing equipment or worker training. By contrast, developing an equivalent German shotgun would have required establishing entirely new manufacturing facilities, training workers in unfamiliar production techniques, and diverting resources from production of rifles, machine guns, and other established weapon systems. German industrial capacity in 1918 was already strained beyond sustainable limits, producing ammunition and weapons at rates that consumed available raw materials faster than they could be replaced. Adding shotgun production would have required choices about what existing production to reduce, choices that German military leadership could not make without accepting unacceptable risks in other areas. The ammunition logistics further illustrated American industrial advantages. Shotgun shell production utilized established commercial manufacturing infrastructure that existed independently of military arsenals. Winchester, Remington, and Peters Cartridge Company operated facilities that had been producing shotgun ammunition for civilian markets since the 1870s. Military buckshot specifications required modifications to commercial loads, but the fundamental manufacturing processes remained identical. Production could be scaled rapidly by increasing shifts and adding workers to existing facilities rather than constructing new factories. American shotgun shell production reached approximately 1 million rounds monthly by mid-1918 using manufacturing capacity that did not compete with rifle ammunition production. This production rate reflected less than 30% utilization of total American shotgun ammunition manufacturing capacity, meaning production could have been tripled or quadrupled if tactical requirements had demanded it. The industrial flexibility demonstrated by this rapid scaling would become a defining characteristic of American military production throughout the 20th century, repeatedly providing decisive advantages over adversaries with more rigid industrial structures. The training implications of shotgun employment demonstrated another dimension of American military adaptability. Traditional marksmanship training emphasized precision rifle fire at extended ranges, requiring months of instruction to develop soldiers capable of reliable hits at 300 yards or greater. This training investment represented significant resource commitment in terms of ammunition, instructor time, and the opportunity cost of training time devoted to marksmanship rather than other combat skills. Shotgun training required fundamentally less time and ammunition to achieve combat effectiveness. Soldiers could learn basic shotgun operation and tactics in days rather than months because the weapon's spreading pattern forgave aiming errors that would result in complete misses with rifles. Training emphasis shifted from precision marksmanship to speed of target acquisition, aggressive movement, and rapid magazine manipulation. These skills could be developed through dry practice without live ammunition, reducing training costs while actually improving combat readiness for the close-quarters conditions dominating trench warfare. The American approach to shotgun training reflected a broader philosophical difference in how American and German military establishments conceptualized soldier development. German doctrine emphasized lengthy training to develop highly skilled professional soldiers capable of executing complex tactics under any conditions. American doctrine accepted shorter training periods that produced soldiers with narrower but adequate skills for specific tactical contexts. This difference reflected underlying assumptions about the nature of modern warfare and the relationship between individual soldier quality and overall force effectiveness. The psychological impact of shotgun employment on both American and German forces proved as significant as the tactical effects. American soldiers armed with shotguns developed aggressive confidence in close-quarters situations because they understood the overwhelming firepower advantage their weapons provided. This confidence translated into faster, more decisive action during assaults, creating momentum that German defenders found difficult to counter even when they outnumbered attackers or held superior positions. German soldiers facing shotgun-armed opponents experienced profound psychological stress that degraded combat effectiveness beyond the direct physical casualties inflicted. The simultaneous impact of multiple projectiles created sensory and cognitive overload even among experienced combat veterans. Soldiers who survived shotgun encounters described feeling helpless against weapons that delivered overwhelming firepower faster than human reaction time could process. The knowledge that traditional defensive positions offered minimal protection against shotgun fire eroded confidence in defensive tactics that had sustained German military effectiveness throughout 4 years of warfare. Medical evidence from both American and German sources documented the distinctive wound patterns created by buckshot impacts. Each pellet carried sufficient kinetic energy to penetrate deeply into human tissue, creating wound channels that bled profusely and caused rapid incapacitation. The spreading pattern meant that single shotgun blasts frequently struck multiple body areas simultaneously, creating compound trauma that overwhelmed the body's compensatory mechanisms. Soldiers hit by multiple pellets from close range typically lost consciousness within seconds and died within minutes without immediate medical intervention that was rarely available in combat conditions. German military medical services struggled to treat shotgun wounds effectively because the injury patterns differed fundamentally from rifle or artillery wounds they were equipped and trained to address. A single rifle bullet created one wound channel that could be located, explored, and treated using established surgical techniques. A shotgun blast created multiple wound channels distributed across the body, requiring simultaneous treatment of injuries to different anatomical systems. German field hospitals lacked the personnel, equipment, and medical supplies to provide effective care for the volume and complexity of shotgun casualties generated during major engagements. The German government's continued diplomatic protests against American shotgun use throughout late 1918 reflected genuine medical concerns combined with recognition of the devastating tactical effectiveness these weapons demonstrated. The August 1918 German note to the United States government through Swiss diplomatic channels claimed that shotgun pellets caused suffering exceeding that produced by any other small arms weapon and demanded immediate cessation of shotgun employment as a violation of the laws of war. The note threatened trial and execution of captured American soldiers found in possession of shotguns as war criminals. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.